the American. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm a professor at the American University of Beirut, and I have been here for probably 20 years, having lived in the US as a professor at Harvard and Michigan for almost 12 years. Thank you for inviting me to share with you my thoughts about the economic and financial problems that Lebanon is facing currently. The way we're gonna do it, I will share with you the bad news, and Dr. Daniel will provide some solutions. So I will describe the dire situation, and then potential solutions, reforms, and possible solutions will be presented by Dr. Daniel. Now, the economic model, along with the fiscal and monetary policies, and the lack of real forward-looking economic policies, have failed to incentivize the establishment of a productive economy in this part of the world. But the economic activities has focused on services, real estate, imports, and financial services. In the sense, the productive sectors, on the other hand, such as industry, manufacturing, and agriculture, were not encouraged to grow given the lack of supportive policies and incentives. For example, to shed some light, I would try to shy away from complicated numbers, but I need to share with you some numbers so that we can kind of shed light on the issue. In 2018, 16% of our economic activity, of our GDP, came from real estate activities, 14% from retail and trade. And trade mostly is based on imports. And 9% came from financial services. So when you add all these real estate, financial, trade, and imports, they add up to around 40% of our domestic economic activities. And when you compare over the past 5 or 10 years, agriculture dropped from almost 5% to 3%, industry dropped from 17 to 13. Now, in general, this model, along with other factors, such as bureaucracy, weak contract enforcement, long procedures, and lack of proper infrastructure, definitely has weakened the competitiveness of businesses in Lebanon. According to Doing Business Index, if you want, I can share the presentation. I can share my screen with you. Would that be of any help? Would you like me to share the screen with you so I can share the presentation with you?
Yeah, that would be great. We like that, yes.
Sure. Let me see if I can do this.
You can do, Assem. Yes, you can. Otherwise, when you open by here.
I think I need
Assem.
Firewalls. I can share the screen.
Yeah. You want me to share?
Sure.
Okay. Please 1 second. This one?
Yes. Great. So, I'm on slide 3. Why I'm not able to. So this model, along with other factors, such as bureaucracy and weak contract enforcement, as I said earlier, long procedures, and naturally have weakened the infrastructure and have weakened the competitiveness of our economy. So in general, when the competitiveness of the businesses in Lebanon have weakened, and if we look at the Doing Business Index of the World Bank, Lebanon had a global rank of 143 and a low score of 54 on the ease of doing business. The barriers for starting new business is very high, as the rank of starting business, I think it's 151. And the same goes for trading across borders, which take into account the ease of procedures to export. Now, on the next slide, we ended up with a business environment that has low productivity. In other words, we do not produce enough real competitive goods, coupled with our peg currency, which was overvalued to start with. Just putting things in perspective, for the past 23 years, our currency has been pegged at a fixed rate, $1 equals 1,500 liras. And nothing have changed over the past 23 years. And that naturally, given the lack of competitiveness of the Lebanese businesses, have led to low exports. So our products were too expensive to export and be able to compete in the global markets. On the other hand, the exchange rate encouraged a high level of imports, and now we are heavily dependent on imports. Consequently, we had a trade deficit for decades, and for that we needed dollars. We needed foreign currency to import. And over the years, these dollars were mainly financed by inflows or transfers from the country to the country from abroad. And these dollars were mainly financed, in the form of remittances from expats or others. Now, over the past 30 years, if you look at an aggregate number, Lebanon has imported $340 billion worth of goods and services and has exported less than 60 billion, which explains the deficit in our trade balance of around 280 billion. To make things worse, today, Lebanon produces 18% of what we eat. Now, as I mentioned, we relied on external inflows to cover our deficit in the trade balance. So, and this is essentially to finance the import of the imports. And these were excessively high over decades. So expats transferred money to Lebanese banks with attractive interest rates, and that were channeled to other investments, mainly real estate. Now, in 2008, the remittances constituted a massive 20% of GDP. When the world was going through a financial crisis, we had our golden years. Money was flowing into the country like there is no tomorrow. Now, over the past couple of years, the remittances had dropped significantly due to several internal and external factors, among which the drop in oil prices and their impact on the GCC countries, the regional political and security factors, in addition to the internal and economic and financial situation. So, starting from 2011, remittances have dropped significantly. To give you an idea, in 2010, the inflow, we had $17 billion of hard currency coming into the country. That dropped to 2019 to $3 billion. So we had a significant drop in the hard currency inflow into the country. Now, I think we are on slide 7, Robert. Can you change, please, the, yeah, slide 7. Yeah. Now, I think the earlier one, 2 slides earlier, yes, yes. Now, on top of these factors, the public administration over the past decades constituted a key factor in the deteriorating situation. The management of the public resources suffered from severe inefficiencies. And a notable example are the recurrent and persistent losses associated with the electricity sector. Other examples relate to wasted resources associated with excessive hiring, salaries of a number of non-productive state employees, bribes, waste in the implementation of public projects, among many others. These reflect the poor governance and corruption of the system that we have in place and their high associated costs. If you add unproductive expenditures, meaning interest, the servicing the debt, government employees' salaries and electricity, that accounts for almost 120% of the revenues generated by the government. And naturally, we have the expenses is going up and we have very weak tax compliance system. So a very generous pension system for specific groups, poor governance and very high interest burden that make the fiscal situation a lot worse than it is. Now, if you, the next slide, Robert, please. That gives you a snapshot of where the country, we need the next slide, which is corruption, yes. You know, if you take a snapshot as to where the country stands in terms of corruption, the Transparency International Corruption Index shows that Lebanon ranks 137 out of 180 countries in the severity of corruption, and its score is 28, 0 being the poorest. So in 2019, 68% of the people surveyed indicated that they thought that corruption has increased over the years. And out of the countries surveyed, Lebanon has the highest bribery rate. 41% of those surveyed in Lebanon said they have bribed a government employee in exchange for services in the past 12 months, compared to 4% in Jordan, 17% in neighboring countries, 24% in Sudan, 14% in Tunisia. So corruption has, and we know corruption has some tangible costs related to wasted public resources, in addition to theft, among others. But it also has many intangible costs relating to disincentivizing the businesses and investments, as it would become more difficult for investors to operate in ensuring that their rights are protected. Now, this is the, on this graph, we show that the persistent negative and excessive fiscal balance out of GDP due to the government's low revenues and high expenses. Last year, the deficit reached a level of 12%. So we have our budget deficit is 12% of, the deficit is 12% of the budget. We're spending 12% more than what we are earning. Can we move to the next slide, Robert, please? Now, the key question is, how was this deficit financed? Well, naturally, through high levels of debt. But while debt was used to cover some of the expenses, interest payments were getting higher and higher, leading to exacerbating the problem, and that representing around 50% of the revenues, as we mentioned earlier. which naturally led to higher deficits and higher debt and a never-ending cycle. The total debt kept on increasing over the years and reached 157% of GDP in 2019, among the highest in the world. And naturally, years of large budget deficit and higher interest rates pushed the stock debt, level of debt, to an unsustainable high levels. Now, the natural question, who provided this debt? So if I look at the next slide, please. So who provided this debt? Definitely banks were the main creditors for the state. As the external money flew into the banking system, it became huge relative to the size of the economy. In 2019, deposits in the banking sector represented 327% of GDP, and the banking sector assets represented around 422% of GDP, again, among the highest in the world. But instead of directing this money to lending to the private sector and supporting a productive economy, the money was invested in government debt, which paid attractive interest rates to these banks. Now, this led to the crowding out effect, where the public sector deprived the private sector from sufficient access to financing. And the central bank's policies led to a growing credit and liquidity squeeze on the private sector. But one of the most critical consequences relating to the higher exposure of banks is the risk of the sovereign. You know, the banks put all their eggs in one basket, lending to the government. Now the government is in trouble, and the banking sector is therefore in big trouble. In fact, next slide, please. In fact, most of the bank's assets were invested or placed with the state, whether the government or the central bank. Last year, 75% of the major banks' assets were invested with the state, and only 25% were lent out to the private sector, a percentage that has dropped from 33 a couple of years ago. Now, the loans to the private sector have declined also over the past couple of years, and over a 5-year period, you know, as of end of 2019, for example, 60% of the bank's risk assets were placed at the central bank, compared to 44% 5 years ago. And this is due to the, Daniel is going to be definitely talking about this, reflects the financial engineering operations where the central bank offered banks incentives to deposit funds with it. So recently, actually last week, the central bank of Lebanon asked Lebanese banks to raise the provisions on the expected credit losses on their holdings of government Eurobonds from 9.5% to 45% after the government decided to suspend payments of interest payments and principal on all outstanding dollar-denominated bonds. I know I'm speaking to a Brazilian audience, and default and high interest rates and issues with the state finances is no stranger to you. But this is a country that Lebanon prides itself that has never defaulted ever, and have paid during the civil war they never missed a single payment on its debt. And this is shocking. This is very, has significant impact in this part of the world. Now, moving on to slide 13. This is a major catalyst that really exacerbated the problem. As mentioned earlier, the external inflows in foreign currency to the country dropped over the past years. So the central bank had to resort to its reserves in foreign currency to prevent the devaluation of the pound. Now, in light of the constant outflow of dollars out of the country, whether paid to imports or for other reasons. In 2016, the pressure on the BDL, on the central bank reserves, grew larger. So the central bank resorted to financial engineering operations with local banks, with the objective of attracting deposits in foreign currency, rebuilding its reserves, and therefore enabling the central bank to defend the pound. So it swapped government debt in Lebanese lira and US dollars and offered banks high interest rates on deposits at the central bank. He was interested in getting, USD bills, foreign currency. In turn, the banks, in order to secure these deposits, the banks went and offered customers, their clients, high interest rates to attract new deposits in foreign currency. While these operations on the surface appears that they have delayed the crisis, they were naturally associated with high cost. Now, to contain the bleed, the central bank increased significantly returns on the financial engineering that got to a price of 19% on US denominated term deposits. And in turn, banks started offering customers 14 or 15% annual interest rates on 3-year term deposits, when in Switzerland, you were earning half or 75 basis points. So 0.75%. Lebanese banks were offering 14 or 15% on dollar-denominated deposits. Now, naturally, rates on foreign exchange deposits almost doubled from 3 to 5 to 7% in 2019. Now, naturally, this accumulated significant losses, and now it is estimated, now we are disagreeing on the amount of losses that the central bank has, between 50 and 80, and we are more likely to believe the 80 rather than the lower numbers. So naturally, this created a halt in the private sector. When you as a business have the opportunity to put your money in the bank risk-free, supposedly risk-free, earning 15%, rather than expanding your plant or investing in the private sector and taking the risk, it was a no-brainer. It was easy to make a decision. Why don't I stop? I don't want to expand. Let me put my money in the bank, earning 15% and enjoying the luxury life. Now, slide 14. Next slide, Robert, please. Now, on top of these internal factors, the country was affected by regional and geopolitical factors, whether relating to wars or security risks, which created an instability for investments. The Syrian war and the cost of the refugees who fled to Lebanon and the drop in remittances due to the drop in oil prices, all these had their toll on the situation in Lebanon. Around 1.5 million displaced Syrians have taken refuge in Lebanon since March 2011. And this has further pushed the Lebanese economy to put undue pressure on the infrastructure and put an additional burden on the Lebanese economy. And we know that the Lebanese economy is largely dependent on Syria, not just as a trading partner, but also as a significant transit route. The oil crisis also hit the MENA region, and that had a significant impact on the remittances. Now, naturally, the consequences, I think we are on the next slide, Robert, please. The consequences on the economic and social front started to appear a couple of years ago. This is not this did not start last month. This has been accumulating for years, but definitely it was exacerbated in 2019 and 2020. So the drop in inflows to the country and the banking system reflected a shattered confidence. And in finance, when you lose confidence, you lose a major engine to reboot the economy. And that led to a liquidity squeeze. Now, the economic activity was weak since 2015, as reflected by the very low GDP growth, which turned negative in 2018 and now is on its third year of negative growth. Now, the current sudden stop in inflows that used to finance large current account deficits in the past now exerts heavy pressure on the central bank's foreign currency reserves and triggered a continuous depreciation in the Lebanese lira in the parallel foreign exchange market. Inflation is rising rapidly, partly due to the devaluation of the pound and the country's excessive reliance on imports, which is denominated in foreign currency. And with devaluation, you get drop in the purchasing power, and you are all familiar with the impact of devalued currency. Now, the last two slides, I think. So as the central bank reserves decline, the government is no longer able to tap the financial markets, especially with the default that they had. So they cannot raise more debt due to the rising risks. So naturally, the government defaulted on its debt in March 2020 and entered into negotiations with the creditors to restructure the debt. In parallel, the rating agencies kept on downgrading Lebanon's rating until it reached the current, and the lowest today, which is selective default rating. So the economic conditions has led a large number of companies into liquidation and naturally bankruptcy. And these companies can no longer repay their debt to the banks and laid off employees, leading to unprecedented unemployment rates. And the social consequences are overwhelming, as the poverty rate reached 45% and expected to increase further. Now, in the longer term, this is a country that produces talent, and our brain drain has slowed down significantly over the past, probably 20 years. Now we are seeing a significant uptick in the brain drain, and this is the talent that is the human capital, and this is the what we call the Lebanese oil. Now we are seeing it having a second wave of brain drain, and that's all due to the political, social, security. It's a combination of a lot of things. Unfortunately, on the long run, the cost is going to be a lot more significant than the economic and financial numbers indicated to be. Now, moving forward, the situation cannot be resolved by quick or standalone fixes. Nobody has the magic, button. It needs deep and comprehensive reforms, whether at the physical level, at the financial, the banking level, or the public management level. The public debt will, of course, need to be restructured in a way to reduce the debt burden of the country. We need to have a tax system that is fair and equitable, efficient in terms of generating government revenues. And definitely, we need to have a serious and committed public servants to fight corruption, the independent judicial system, and to have some accountability in our public sector. I'm sorry to have all bad news, but this is the current situation. I thank you for listening, and I hope I have shed some light on the economic situation in this country.
Thank you very much, Assem. Let's wait the question in the end of the second speech. The second speech will be Daniel Melhem, who introduced Daniel for me is our friend Asad Franji. Where are you, Asad? Asad Franji told me about Daniel. He's really, he knows a lot about chaos economic. And Dr. Daniel, please introduce yourself and let's listen. Thank you very much.
Thank you everybody. Thank you, Professor Assem, for this clear diagnostic for the situation, our actual situation in Lebanon. And thank you also, Robert and Dr. Assad, for inviting me to expose some thought and idea about the assessment and reform or the future trend of the situation in Lebanon, or the future trend of the economy, Lebanese economy. So actually, when I talk with Professor Assem to organize the presentation, Professor Assem told me let us to make very easy, or presentation more easy, and not technical presentation. Actually, I chose to go in the technical presentation. Why? Because a part of the problem in Lebanon is the missing in the economic culture, or the missing in risk culture in Lebanon. As Professor Assem in his presentation, that if you want to put your money in the bank with 10% of interest rate, you didn't any idea about the risk of the sovereign risk of another any risk about your. So we cannot put the both interest rate and the risk behind this assessment. So that's why I go into this very slowly in the presentation and the technical notions, because it's very important to understand the future trend, because Dr. Assem present the bad situation or the actual situation in Lebanon. But I think it's very important to mention that today we have a very good opportunity to construct an economy, equilibrium economy, and to construct something very organized and based on theoretical mechanism. So that's why I go into this to present the technical or my technical support to understand the future trend in Lebanon. So first of all, I have to explain something in the economy and the mechanism of the economy in the world. The healthy economy should get a lot of dispositive, a lot of tools. Tools meaning that can organize an economy and stimulate the economy to go in the economic cycle, a long-term economic cycle. So that's why we have a lot of the tools, but the three main tools, as mentioned, Professor Assem, one, the fiscal policy, we have monetary policy, and the third one, the tax policy. Tax policy, usually we use it with the fiscal policy, but I prefer to present it alone. So the first one, if you can put the presentation, please. Can you see my presentation or not? Dr. Robert, please, can you put my presentation, please? Okay. Okay, thank you. So, first of all, I want to present some notions, economic notions. Then I present the real problem in the real problem and the fundamental economy, and how we think or how we propose some idea to solution to go out of the crisis in Lebanon. So the first one, what is the fiscal policy? The fiscal policy actually that can get the revenue, compute the revenues and the expenditure of government. So that's why, as you see before in the presentation of Professor Assem, that we are in the all times and the exponential deficit in the budget or on the current account on balance and current of this. We have a lot of the exponential deficit, but actually in the monetary and in the fiscal policy, the main important in this fiscal policy is dedicated or targeted the growth and employment and the inflation. When we are here in France or another countries and USA, when we use the budget or the fiscal policy is not to manage the country, is dedicated to targets. That target is the growth and the unemployment and the inflation and also. So that's this policy in Lebanon. It was neutral. It was very weak since 2990. The second policies are the tax policies. Tax policies is very important because not also they collect the taxes and the revenues for the country or for the state. No, it's better for that because the main importance of this the tax policies is to reduce the income gap between the classes inside society. And another thing, the classes are the gap, reduce the gap between sectors, because in the presentation before, Dr. Assem mentioned that Lebanese economy are concentrated on the service sector that can contribute about 65% on add value for the GDP. And it's very, if you have the portfolio, a larger portfolio, your portfolio is concentrated from one sector. And that's why any problem or any shocks, external shocks or internal shocks that will be very catastrophic for this economy. And the second hand, the tax policy is very important to reduce the gap in income for the class, the poor class, middle class, or the high class. Because in Lebanon, we can say about 5% of the people get about 90% of wealth of this country. And this statistic is very, very high, meaning that the tax policy does not work in Lebanon. So we have 2 of 3 policy does not work in Lebanon. The third one, that the monetary policy. The monetary policy, as explained, we have the exchange rate, the fixed exchange rate, and the second thing, the high interest rate. This both elements give an idea about the stimulate the consumption, and the consumption can going more sharp than the revenues. And this one and this idea stimulate the imports more than the exports. So technically, and this mechanism is very important to understand. And when we want to get a solution, how this mechanism function. Usually for the healthy economy, this function or this policy will work and should work simultaneously because one complete another. And this one, there was the healthy economy. In Lebanon, we cannot, or we don't have just a one policy or monetary policy. Another distortion in the fundamental economy in Lebanon, another one based on the profile of the economic. I want to just explain this notion, and then I'm going more faster than this. The growth profile of the economic, as we said, Dr. Assem in his presentation, is basically based on the sector services, and the growth it come from just one service, and income of the country come just from the sector services sector. Sorry, so that's why all concentration in one thing. And another thing we have, if we can use the if we can call the procyclical theory to explain this one, we say when you are concentrating about just one services, all employment, the wage, everything, the revenue concentrate on this one, and that's a very problem. So that's why we have a disequilibrium inside an economy and for the growth. The second notion is please you can go into another slide, please, Robert. The second notion is the inflation, the profile inflation in Lebanon. If we accept 2020, we see the inflation was stimulated by the oil prices and the imports, the foods, meaning that the external or exogenous factor that stimulate the inflation rate. Actually, the monetary policy usually use it in time to another to stimulate the inflation. Inflation is very good health or indicator for an economy. So when we use, for example, when we use an strategy or a policy that's to stimulate the consumption, the inflation, then the consumption, then the growth inside the economy, and that basically will stimulate the internal demand inside this economy. That's why it's very healthy and very important to sign that. Another fragmentation inside the economy, on fundamental economy, on side distortion, is the three institutions. The first institution is BDL, it's a Banque de Liban. Actually, from 13 years ago, and use one policy, a fixed policy, addressed to save the purchasing power parity inside the economy, but it neglected all another factor as like the inflation and another factor. So this and inside also for another factors that mentioned before. So this factor, the role of the central bank, just to alimented or financing the debt for the country, and then use all the reserve in US dollar and make about $48 billion if lost. Please, this estimated loss, $48 billion is to yet to today. Save this number because I want to use it after in the solution. Another structure or another distortion in the sector banking sector. Sorry, if you see the balance sheet and that's in the banking sector, you can see all the money, the deposit in BDL as the certificate of deposit, about $90 billion and 60 trillion of Lebanese lira. But $90 billion are certificate deposit with 80% of interest rate is very important for this bank. So the banks in Lebanon does not do any real role for the banking system. The banking system is very important for everywhere in the world because the banks ensure the transaction of economic policy from the state, from the economic policy and to peoples. So that's why it's very important to mention that. So the Lebanese bank works since 20 years ago just for collect the money from the depositor and give it to central bank, and central bank to finance the Lebanese state. So that's why this is not the rule for this bank. We estimate the loss for the banking sector about $30 billion. The third institution, or the distortion in the institution and the economy, is the performance or the fiscal performance of the Lebanese country, and this because we are in deficit, on continual deficit. This deficit be being unsustainable because it arrived to about 150% to GDP with the debt. So this is very real difficulty to create a new mechanism to grow in the economy. So the third number I want to collect you to sharing with you is the estimation of the loss of the global economy based on the third institution is $82 billion. $82 billion includes the estimation of the BDL losses and the banking loss. So the banking loss and the BDL loss, and where there are about $4 billion of the loss in the government. So we have the first estimation. This is the government in the government plan about $82 billion. So this number is very important, this number. Why? Because now actually we say how we want to distribute this loss. And this is the main equation today in Lebanon. And everything blocked in Lebanon today, because how we want to distribute this loss. And who want to pay? The Lebanese state, BDL, Bank de Lebanon, associate of Bank of Lebanon, the big depositor or the small depositor. Actually, this one, a lot of people speak about the justice of this distribution. I think today in Lebanon we are blocked in the third point because banks refuse to pay anything. They want to will the depositor pay and the state or Bank de Lebanon pay these losses. So the bank refused to pay anything to yet. So we want to see after this slide, we want to see how can bank support the losses and cannot impact for the global economy or for the banking system. Actually, we have if we want to get a reform, or we want to go to post a solution, there are four main points. I think it's my point of view. Four main points we have to respect. The first one, the first main, that the banking stability. Why the banking system is stability? Because any section, as I mentioned before, the banking sector is very important for the transaction between policies, from the transaction of economic policies from the state to peoples. So that's why we have to maintain this system very strong, because without this system in the future, a crisis will be more hard in Lebanon. The second one, that the system of monetary policy. I think a lot of the people now we say that we have the exchange rate of lira go very sharp, and the devaluation is very deep. I think in Lebanese people, when we tell, or Lebanese government, when you want to take any decision, or Lebanese or by BDL central bank, they will take into account to protect the poor people. And the poor people, we cannot do what we do today in Lebanon about the devaluation of this. We have to protect the poor people and the first class or the middle class, because now we don't have the middle class. We are the poor class and very rich classes in Lebanon. The third one, or the third point, the justice and the distribution of the losses between all parts. And the last point, and very important one, any action and short term will be respect the equilibrium of long term. That's why I present all points, the notion between the three dispositive or the three policies and then the all institution. So when we take any decision today, we have to respect the equilibrium of long term. So that's why we have a long term vision, and we take the action in short term. When the action in short term, we have to say if they make a disequilibrium of long term. So for example, for the just a simple example, if we see now we want to devaluate or we do just a border currency for Lebanon. The border currency at short term is very good to stabilize the exchange rate in Lebanon, but at long term is very difficult, because it destroyed the productivity and then the exportation, and then we have another crisis in the future. So that's why any action in the short term will be respect the equilibrium to long term. Next slide, please. So now we're coming to the fundamental reform. Sorry, we have both reforms in Lebanon, or three reforms in Lebanon. At long-term reforms based on the mechanism, we want to create a mechanism for Lebanese economy, and the second one, the short-term reform based on the financial reform, and the third one is very urgent reform. And that's one we have to do it today before tomorrow, because the cost of this reform, the delay on the cost of this way is very expensive, and that's what we happen today. So first of all, we want to the Lebanese country or Lebanese government, you want to fix and target for which policy will be used and which target to be. If this target is the growth or the employment, inflation, everything. So first, the main target or the main objective for government, it should be fixed and target, and then we use this mechanism to this target. And the second time, when we finish from the target, then we go into the second reform. The first one, when we say, but actually today, in Lebanon, if we want to use this mechanism, we cannot, because the mechanism of the target at long term, we can use the target at long term, but we cannot use the three policy today, because we have something we call it the counter cyclical policy or the pro-cyclical policy. A pro-cyclical policy or the counter-cyclical, usually in the crisis, we can use the counter-cyclical policy to stimulate the economy, meaning that in the crisis of coronavirus, today, we can use the expensive, we can inject in the economy a lot of liquidity, thus to stimulate the growth or to stimulate the unemployment, and then to demand, and then the consumption and the growth. So in Lebanon, we don't have this dispositive. We can have this dispositive, but we can't have enough of money to inject inside the economy. And so that's, we call it the counter-cyclical policy. Now in Lebanon, we have to use the pro-cyclical policies. The pro-cyclical policies meaning I think in the slide number 7, I think in the presentation of Dr. Assem, he mentioned about, we look about the budget of the economy, a Lebanese economy. The budget, there are 4 main parts. The first one is the expenditure and on the wages and salary. The second one is about 30% or 45%, in my opinion. The second one is the debt services, is about 35% of the expenditure of this country, and the third one, the expenditure of the on the electricity, and the last one is the capital expenditure or the investment expenditure. Usually, the last one is 4%. 4%. The expenditure, the capital expenditure, is very, very low, low percentage. Usually, this percentage will be higher than that. But now we can give the idea about the profile of the fiscal performance of this of the Lebanese country. So, if we want to do a fundamental reform, we want to address reform for the fourth part. The first one, 45% expenditure on the salary is very higher. The average of the world between 23% and 25%. So 45% is very high. Despite that, this percentage is very high, and despite that, the reform in this in fiscal policy, especially in fiscal policy, maybe impact the poor class in Lebanon, because the employment and the Lebanon or the labor market is very large in the public sector. So may impact this one, but it's necessary to reduce the expenditure for the country, because we cannot continue in this way and in this manner of expenditure. The second one is the reform of and tax policy. I think in Lebanon we can see. I can give just one example for the TVA, the added value tax. The added value tax in Lebanon is 10% or 11% or 12%, and it's similar for everything. So we cannot do like that, because this tools, the tax, we can do it to really redistribute the revenue and the income inside the country, and we can fight another nut sector or another element that impact our economy. So that's why this reform will be accompanied with the fiscal reform at long term. The third one, the monetary policy. Monetary policy, I think Lebanese government should be the target. What will be, or what you want from this policy? If you want to stimulate the inflation, if you want to fix the purchasing power, or the support for the purchasing power parity of the people, or another objective. That's why the objective, you can put your strategy and your mechanism. So in the Lebanon, we don't have any objective in the economy. We cannot have an objective, because that's why we don't have any mechanism to use in this economy. Please, in the second. The third reform will be for ADL. ADL, that's electricity, the electricity company in Lebanon. And the more important for that, we have judicial reform and the governance reform. I think for Lebanon, I put the blockchain and e-governance. I think the last minister, the minister Afuni, I think he was finished with his work about the e-governance, governance, and that we use the blockchain, because in this case, I think we have reduced the meeting between the peoples and the public workers. So that's why we can reduce something the correction. That's why I put the blockchain, and the third one, the reform of governance. Beside the long-term reform, we have to reform at short term, the financial reform at short term. So that's why I put here beside you, I have the sensitivity of solution and the problem of solution. You can see since October, Lebanese government should be used this tool to reduce the problem, because our problem at short term is the liquidity and the US dollar. So that's why the first one the first action that a government will take it is to reduce or limit the debt of Lebanese state and the Bank Central. And this is very important point, because we will be moderate, or the government should be moderate in reducing this debt, because it's the impact the asset of the Bank Central Bank, and then it can play a role, a very bad role, on the devaluation. I think if Lebanese government cannot say to central bank, we have to eliminate or delete all of this debt, despite that in the Lebanese currency. Because the asset of central bank will reduce sharply, and then we can play a bad role to devaluate the Lebanese lira. The second one, the simple coupon operation. I think now central bank has reduced the interest rate on the deposit certificate from 8% to 4%. I think should be reduced more than that. I think reducing this, we can country or central bank can saving more than $2 billion or $3 billion per year. Another one is the restructuring of the debt, Eurobonds and another debt in the global. And this, our simulation, I was doing a simulation before. I put the result in the next slide. The simulation do with that if we push just the debt for 5 years, so to 2025, if we pay just the services of debt, and we push about just five years restructure this debt, I think a Lebanese country or Lebanese government can save about $3 and $4 billion. Another solution or another point is that the currency devaluation. When we say in the time sensitivity, the currency devaluation is a very bad, and in the risk is the higher risk. When we say the currency devaluation have a risk, the very high risk for the economy and the classes, the mid and poor class and the economy. So that's today what we pay. Now we are not in the eye of the crisis today, but today we are in the crisis, behind the eye of the crisis, because for today we pay the cost very expensive for the delay of the solution, because today we don't have any solution. Now we have the government fighting with the parliament, are fighting with the central bank, and fighting with the banking sector to which one get more loss, or how can we distribute the losses inside the economy. But to yet nobody take any action or reaction at short term to overcome to this problem. Next slide, please. Another, because I explained this one, please. Thank you. And the third reform, I think we should be take it into account, and very shortly, that's the BDL restructuring and the audit and the forensic audit. I think for the transparency are to going long time ago. I think without a forensic audit, we cannot know where are the almost of losses $48 billion inside the economy, or inside the central bank. The second reform, the resolution framework of the complete bank or restructuring of the banking sector, restructuring of the banking sector is very important, because now we cannot say the sector bank can support all the loss, because the losses in the sector bank, I think, are more than $30 billion. Banking assets is $21 billion. So that's we have a deficit about $9 billion. Actually, in the papers, all banks are bankrupted. All bank, not just one, all bank are bankrupted. Now, when we say we want to distribute, when we want to distribute now the losses on the all bonds, I think banks, or the sector banks, can support not more than $4 billion in respect for Basel III. And because in the Basel III, the capital requirement is 80%, in Lebanon is 10%. So that's the difference between the capital requirement and the 10%, we have 2%. So just for $4 billion. The other can support, I think, from the shareholder and the asset of the bank. If remains something more than that, more than that, I think the depositor will pay a part of this losses. Actually, finally, I want to just mention something. What's happened today in Lebanon? That's what all I presented is a theoretical solution. But today, what's happened in Lebanon? In Lebanon, we don't have any solution now applied to yet. We have fighting who get more, how can distribute the losses. But the very dangerous point that the devaluation of the Lebanese lira, who profited from this devaluation and who losses from this devaluation? The institution that lost from this devaluation is the people, government, and central bank. That's just only one can profit from this devaluation of lira is the banking sector. Why? Because banking sector assets is $90 billion in US dollars. And now with the devaluation of the banking asset, banking deposit is $90 billion. The banking asset is $21 billion. When with the lira devaluate, then now at official rate is 3.6 thousand. I think the sector bank now can compute about 75 trillion lira, meaning that when we can going to 2006 with the parliament plan, the banking sector can restructure about the asset can revaluate about $50 billion, meaning that we increase the asset of banking sector, but this is not really this losses. I think if the banking sector gain or profit from the situation, the central bank will lose equal to this number, and meaning that the people should pay, will pay or could pay the very hard cost for this economy. And thank you. I'm so sorry for my English language.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daniel. And before we starting our question, I introduce Guga. Guga tá aí, por favor.
Tô aqui, professor, Dr. Nemer.
Guga, if you want to say something about that, please.
Actually, I wanted to ask a question, if it's possible. Wait. Here is better, the microphone. If I could ask a question for Dan. Yeah. It was a great presentation. And I wanted to know from Professor Assem or Professor Daniel, what do they think about the Caesar Act? How can that affect Lebanon? The Caesar Act is a law that was approved by the American Congress that punishes any bank or company or person who deals with the Syrian regime. So I want to know what would be the impact in Lebanon, and also the impact of the actions of the American government against some Lebanese banks that they accuse of having links to Hezbollah. So that would be my question to both of them.
Daniel, you want to take a stab at it?
Go ahead.
In terms of on the first one, the Caesars Act, the link between Caesars Act and the banking sector, the Lebanese banks probably closed under the supervision of the central bank. They closed all their branches in Syria, and they basically recognized all their capital as losses almost 5 years ago. And literally they got out of Syria completely, probably 5 or 6 years ago. So as an institutions, they don't have a presence in Syria. But the link between Syria and Lebanon is significant. You know, a lot of people pass and trade with Syrian counterparts. Now, the extent of it, the implementation is yet to be seen, but it may have a significant impact on the economic activities between the two countries. But in terms of the risk of big institutions, banks have closed long time ago in Syria. Now, in terms of the sanctions, the American sanctions, this is a very high risk, and you know, banks pay significant attention, the compliance in Lebanese banks today, to make sure that all transactions are cleared from any possible sanctions or any, you know, issues related to Hezbollah. I mean, they are doing a great job in terms of mitigating that risk. The risk is still there. You know, these banks are present. You know, Hezbollah is present in this economy, and the risk is there. But I think, you know, the banks have done a great job in diffusing at least that risk.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to know. And like regarding those two things, because like here in the United States, they talk a lot about like how those two things could affect Lebanon and would be hard for Lebanon. But thank you. It was a great like speech from both of them. Just like I think other people want to ask more questions, but if they don't, I want to ask one more question later on.
Okay. May I ask you, Dr. Assad Ferji, do you have any question, please?
Eu vou falar em árabe, só para agradecer. Eu não tenho uma resposta. A exposição foram excelentes. Eu acho que acredito que seriam pautas de próximas conversas nossas. بحب أوجه تحياتي للأستاذ عاصم والدكتور دانيال. الشرح اللي أعطيتونا إياه كثير واضح. إن شاء الله المرة الجاية نقدر نعمل ترجمة على البرتغالي بشكل أكبر ونقدر نجمع ناس أكثر. نحن هون بالمهجر في عنا نقص بالمعلومات اللي بتوضح صورة لبنان الحقيقية من الناحية الاقتصادية. وما في شك إنه نحن هون عنا اهتمام خاص بالوضع الاقتصادي، لأنه كثر من المغتربين وضعوا ودائعهم بمصارف لبنان، وبشكل أو بآخر بيتأثروا مباشرة بهالطريقة. نحن كاغتراب عنا اهتمام كامل أنه نشارك بالمشاكل اللبنانية، لكن ضمن وضوح رؤية واضحة، لأن الثقة خسرناها من زمان. أنا بحب يعني ما رح نكتر الحديث، أنا بحب أشكر زميلي روبير بعرفه من 40 سنة تقريبا نحن صحبة، وكل الشباب يعني الموجودين، فارس، محمد، ريناتو الصالي، كلهم يعني شباب نعرفهم من 30-40 سنة، وكلنا عندنا اهتمام كبير ومحبة كبيرة للبنان. ونحن بنشوف الوضع بصورة يعني حاليا بصورة مش كثير متفائلة، يعني بالرغم انه وظيفتنا تكون متفائلة. فأنا من جديد بشكر دانيال، تعرفنا عليه من بدي قصيري، والأستاذ عاصم، وإن شاء الله يكون في عنا مقابلات مقبلة، وإن شاء الله نلاقي طريقة أكبر نقدر نعمل ترجمة مباشرة إلى اللغة البرتغالية، لأن الجالية اللبنانية الموجودة بالبرازيل مع الأسف يعني بتفضل دائما أن تسمع الحديث يا باللغة البرتغالية يا باللغتنا العربية. فشكرا لكم جميعا وشكرا للدكتور روبير.
Thank you very much, Assad. I'm going to introduce again Dr. Ray. Dr. Ray Hash from Houston, United States. Do you have any question? Ray is not okay. I have a question for you.
Hello?
Ray.
Wait, is it for me to ask another question?
Okay,
Or
we do it.
okay. No, I just wanted to know, how China is going inside the Lebanese economy. Like there is, like I read this article on the Foreign Policy this week that China is investing now a lot in Lebanon, and how is the impact of the Chinese economy in Lebanon right now, and how did this can happen in the Lebanese economy?
Assem, Daniel.
There was a transaction last week that was announced where a Chinese bank financed the purchase of a couple of carriers for the Middle East Airlines. And there were discussions for, I mean, people don't know, we love France in this part of the world, and you know, the American influence in politics is significant, but the number one trading partner for Lebanon is China. It's not France, it's not the US, and it's not Europe. But it's more of, you know, the notion of going east. Now you hear about, you know, this in the press, but it's more of publicity than action. Now things have been, you know, there is effort to expand the portfolio of our trading partners, but nothing, you know, it's the issue in Lebanon, it's not China or France or the US. The issue is, you know, you can blame everybody, but you really start the solution by looking at the mirror and asking yourself, how can I help myself? We have, you know, incompetent public servants. We have corrupt politicians, you know, and unfortunately, till the pain has to be significant that on the next elections, we don't elect these corrupt politicians so they don't, you know, incur the same damage as they did, okay, while in office. So China is very aggressively trying to invest in this, but China is not a charity organization, and I think people know this. But diversification does not hurt.
Yes, I can add something because it's not simple, as you say, it's not very simple to go into Est because the problem is not with the external partner, because any investor can go into Lebanon at this time because we have a lot of the problem. We have to reform everything. We have to repair our situation inside in Lebanon. Then we can call the outside partner. And the second time, as you said, the second point, sorry, as you said, is that China is not charity. We have several examples in Sri Lanka, I think. In Sri Lanka, the investment of China in the port of Sri Lanka, the main port is Sri Lanka. When Sri Lanka does not pay the part at the end of the year, the China took this port, and there's the main port of Sri Lanka. So China does not make that charity. And the third point, how can this the question that they posed, how can this work with the China and between China and Lebanon? If we can go in the system of SWIFT, meaning that we can import and we pay the US dollar, we don't have the US dollar to pay anything. And the second one, if we can do another system like Iran, China, and Russia, Iran can export the oil, and beside that, you can get the foods and another service and the products. In Lebanon, what we can give for China. So that's why I think is the publicity, not I think is not very real real solution for Lebanon to go into less. I think maybe China can invest in Lebanon 4 or 5, 7, 10 billion. It's okay, but Lebanon now today we need about $25 billion to stabilize the financial situation in Lebanon. That's why it's not very simple and actually very complicated to say China is the solution. We are very, very far from the solution today.
Thank you. I have a question, Daniel and Assem, and I'll ask. First, the diaspora money, you didn't talk a lot about that, and for us it's very important. The diaspora money, first, the importance of this diaspora money in Lebanon, and second, how to recover our confidence in the banks and the Lebanon country to put more money or not to take out our money back from the banks of Lebanon.
I think to regain in terms of transparency, we have to react at very short term, and a good plan for the government and very real negotiation with IMF can give some of confidence in the side in the economic and Lebanese government and Lebanese economy. To yet, what we see from October to yet, there are not a serious solution or not action or serious reaction. What we see now, somebody fighting inside the Lebanese economy between government, parliament, bank sector, and the BDL. We don't have the same numbers, so that's why this one is not cannot help at short term, and it's very, very difficult to elaborate or to elaborate another confidence inside the Lebanese. And the diaspora is a very good question, because maybe it's the solution coming from the diaspora about the rising funding, about the diaspora funding to help to Lebanon. But now the problem inside the Lebanon, the distortion and the political classes and the problem and the fighting between everybody that cannot give any confidence for outside. I think a good plan and good action and reaction at short term that can stabilize the financial sectors, that can stabilize the economic reaction, and then we can get the confidence of the diaspora inside the Lebanese economy.
Thank you.
Robert, if I may share my thoughts on this, because this is a fundamental issue. In this country, we have, the biggest cancer, and I know most of you are doctors and can relate to this. The biggest cancer is the marriage between politics and finance. The banking sector has the highest percentage of board members who are politicians in the world. The highest percentage of politicians who sit on the board of directors of banks are available in Lebanon compared to all the banking sector all over the world. So the marriage between politics and finance is significant. Now they're fighting. The argument is, you can look at the structural problems. So we have structural problems, which is now the conflict between the banking sector and the political, elite. And that can go on, you close one battle, they will open another battle. However, this country has gone through ups and downs. It was destroyed 3 times or 2.5 times over the past probably 40 years, in 1982, in 2006, and in between. So there were significant, major structural destruction over the past probably 40 years. But this problem is probably more significant than the previous ones. And unfortunately, now all the models that they are working on, looking at, you know, $250,000 or $500,000 deposits, you know, that needs to be protected. To what extent is the sharing of the losses as Daniel has, you know, presented? Is it going to be $1 million or $500,000? Is it going to be, the more it drags on, the lower the threshold, without knowing the details? For example, you know, why $1 million? Give you an idea. If I am a municipality employee, my salary is $500, but I'm a thief and I take bribes and I have $1 million in my account, and somebody who came from Sao Paulo sold his business, got $1 million to retire with his family. So he has $1 million and I have $1 million. And if we don't look at the source of funds, as Daniel indicated, and not only for the central bank, when you want to get a threshold, because there are people with $10 million deposit in the bank that are clean, they are they worked hard for this 10 million. And an employee or a politician or, you know, somebody who is a thief has the $10 million. So if we don't look at the source of funds, anybody who is related to the government, anybody who has, you know, won a contract from the government and his money is above a threshold, you know, should be probably treated differently. But these decisions are going to be made by politicians, and these are the corrupt people. So it's going to be, as Daniel indicated, it is a lot more complicated than people think it is. But this is a country, you know, I work at the American University of Beirut. We are 150 years old. We have seen ups and downs, and we will survive, and we will flourish again.
Thank you very much. Dr. Enrique, you have a question, please.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Assem and Mr. Daniel, for the explanation. Thank you, Mr. Robert, for this great event. I would like to ask, when I hear about Lebanese economy, it strikes me that it's very similar to Brazilian economical problems. So we're talking about pension reforms, tax reforms, fiscal reforms, and it's more or less the same topics. But unfortunately, I have seen that the Brazilian politicians are starting to understand the importance of those reforms, and they're going through them. So we have approved some important reforms recently in Brazil, such as the pension reform. My question for both of you is, would you say that the political elite in Lebanon also understands the importance that of those reforms in Lebanon? And if not, would you say that the confessionalist system is preventing Lebanon of going through those important reforms? Thank you.
Daniel?
Listen, I can. Brazil is not similar to Lebanon because it's a different economic profile, I think. But in Lebanon, but to answer in your request about the elite in Lebanon, I can give you just one example, and you can see the difference. Lebanon, I think, is the alone country in the world that have a lot of this crisis at the same time. We can see Argentina, we can see a lot of the Iceland have the banking crisis, Argentina financial crisis, everything. But in the same time, this other crisis, I think Lebanon is what is alone in the world. But I can give you something. From the first day of the crisis in Iceland, and the second day, the parliament took the capital control law. Now in Lebanon, from October to yet, there are about $4 billion go out to Lebanon and now yet there are not capital control. This meaning one of two. One, maybe the political classes do not understand the real crisis, what we are, or our real situation today. The second one, I think maybe they know, but they are get out their money out of the outside of Lebanon. This is a simple example can give an idea. When we going to Parliament Commission, the Parliament Commission, and the last time when we say now we want to devaluate the Lebanese lira from now to 2026, and 2026 we want to go back to 1,100 for $1. This is a bullshit. This is a bullshit. The people does not understand what we are now today. How we can to get go back to old exchange rate to 1,500 lira. So that's why we are very different. I think the political decision in the Brazil is completely different than Lebanon. The the political classes in the Brazil is completely different in Lebanon. So that's why the solution in Lebanon going for the political fighting, then for the economic solution. So that's why all solution in Lebanon take a lot of the time to go out. So that's why I think in Lebanon is very complicated. I don't know. We have a lot of solution. We have a very good opportunity to construct something together. But I think half the problem is a political problem, is not the economy. We have 50% economic problem, and the first 50% of the problem is political problem.
Thank you. Dr. Walid, your question, please.
Congratulations, both of you professors, Assem and Melhem, for the excellent explanations. Like physicians, when we are facing a patient bleeding, the first things we do is stop this bleeding. Do you think, I'm seeing this patient like a Lebanon, this body like a Lebanon. Do you think that you will have a good plan without this political changes?
This is a very interesting question. The short answer is no. The political solution is the start. We need to stop the bleeding. I will have confidence when I see a judge issuing a ruling, okay, to send one medium level a government employee who took bribe and sent him to jail. I lived in California during the Rodney King in 1991. When all the police went to South Central Los Angeles, I lived in Orange County, which is one of the highest standard of living counties in the country. And I saw littering on the streets because people knew that there was no cops because they were busy in South Central Los Angeles. When we know we are gonna get away with our doing, we tend to be complacent. But when I know, this guy went to jail, I will think twice before violating the law. So it starts by setting an example. Unfortunately, today, in spite of everything that, the suffering and the crisis, we have not seen a single wrongdoer going to jail. So, and how can you send a vote of confidence? The biggest asset we have is the human capital. What's the second biggest asset? It's our size. One good deed can have a very positive rippling effect on the economy. It's all a vote of confidence. Once we trigger something that gives people hope, people were building when the Israelis left Lebanon, the day they left. So we tend to be very optimistic. All we need is a shred of hope. So it starts with the political. The bleeding that you are referred to in the patient is essentially that political reform. And it starts by one action.
Thank you. Dr. Isper, have a question, please?
Sure. I have a very naive question from a layperson. This is regard to the war in Syria. We see in the news it's subsiding, and from afar we can tell that something is accommodating in Syria. What would that impact this whole scenario? I mean, we have like over 1 million refugees into the country. Would they mostly go back? Would that result in an improvement of the current situation or not?
This is not because of smart policies by Lebanese politicians. The devaluation, I mean, these people who, at least a big part of the Syrian presence in Lebanon, they work and they provide needed labor. Now getting 1 million liras, which was the average salary for a Syrian worker, that probably comes to $120. So some may feel they are better off going back to Syria, where till today they are getting free healthcare and free education from their government, which they are not getting in Lebanon. So it's a very dicey and delicate situation. Some of them are getting funding from international organizations to stay in Lebanon. And if they go to Syria, they will lose that support. So it's a very delicate situation, but the financial and the economic crisis in Lebanon is not helping, or is probably expediting the resolution of the Syrian refugees in Lebanon.
Thank you. Assem, it's not a question, but it's just, how can a country grow if in the last 70 years we have war or expected for war? We are always in war. How do you want that people from outside Lebanon invest in Lebanon when you are not sure about what will happen? This is still a big problem. It's not easy not to approach to political discussion, but that's it.
I mean, this is you are touching on the DNA of Lebanese. We have lived instabilities, and the people in this country deserve better. With all the instabilities, if you look at the past 40 years, we have not had in economic cycle, we measure, periods in 5 or, 4 to 6 year periods. So if you go back over the past 40 years, we have not had a period of one economic cycle without a major instability. Minor war, minor political instability, or yet we, again, coming back to this institution that I am zooming from my office at the American University of Beirut, we still attract the cream of the crop. We still attract the most talented individuals in the Middle East. We produce people who go to Harvard and MIT in spite of everything. Our students graduate here and go to grad school in top institutions in the world. As long as this country produces the talent, okay, the politicians are relying or taking advantage of this. Hopefully, with the, what happened on October 17, that is educating people across the classes that, you know, these politicians are not serving you. So the hope is next time, you know, we get to elect a higher portion or a higher percentage of politicians who speak independently. That's the hope. And is this a wishful thinking? Maybe. But sooner or later, you know, people are going to realize that it is these politicians who started the war and now they are wearing suits and making political decisions. Unfortunately, they were re-elected, you know, multiple times to make decisions in peacetime, but they are still soldiers, but wearing suits.
Thank you, Assem. Thank you. I had a question to Dr. Daniel, living in France. May you explain to us, please, what the importance of France in Lebanon and its economy?
Cedar, Paris 1, 2, 3, and Cedar is the same thing. But I think actually today, Lebanon is the last country in the Middle East that the France can compute on this country, and France you will help Lebanon and Lebanese people, but the Lebanese people does not help themselves. So when we hear yesterday the Minister of Foreign Affairs here in France, I mean, you want to go into Lebanon to help the Lebanese people, but when we see if France can help now the Lebanese how, and injecting in the investment in Lebanon is very difficult, because now with the coronavirus, every cannot support the needs of his country. It's very difficult to invest now in Lebanon or to help Lebanon. But I think if France now can help something Lebanon to change this system, but it's very difficult yet actually today. So your question is very good, but I think I don't have any answer for your question today, because the problem, as I told you, is not dependent on the exogenous element from outside Lebanon. The first we have to help ourselves before to request an external demand or an external helps from another outside of country. So that's why if France do something, or everybody, USA or China, can help something now, I think the helps that not give the good results, or that not give the good issues. So that's why we have to wait now, and we have to wait what we want to do inside Lebanon, and then request the help of outside Lebanon. But I think for the IMF, this is information from the negotiation with the IMF. The IMF and the CEDAR, these are because we need the once or the alone solution to Lebanon to go to the IMF program and the CEDAR program. I think CEDAR program is more weak than IMF program, because now all people can give a promise, or all country give the promise for Lebanese to invest inside the economic country, inside the economic Lebanese economy since about 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Now the situation, the international situation is different from before. So that's why it's very difficult now to say if CEDAR program can go well or not. But I think the issues for Lebanon is in the IMF program, because it's the loan that ensure that the US dollars or the foreign reserve can go into inside the Lebanon. But the question is how want to use this program. So this is the question. So if we can get this $10 billion from the IMF, how we want to use this one in the infrastructure, and the agriculture, and the industrial manufacturing, on what? This is a good question to use, because in the plan of the government we didn't have any answer about this this how.
Thank you very much. thank you very much for these speeches. You really put us in the real situation of Lebanon, and we appreciate every word you said. And I ask you to say the last speech for 1 minute, maybe 1 minute each one. Please, Daniel, you're going to continue.
Now, I think, sorry, I look to thank you for inviting us. But just I have one message, because the situation in Lebanon is very difficult, but we have a very good opportunity. We have a lot of solution. I think what we need now, first of all, so somebody address the speech to people, address the speech to diaspora. If somebody, I have my money in Lebanon, but if the president or another body can go in and told me, yes, we are in the problem, the main problem in Lebanon, because to yet nobody address it as a speech to people, to speak the people. We have the problem. You have your money, but your money, you want to get it inside the bank for 10 years or 15 years. I think the people maybe accept this solution, but to yet the ambiguous in the situation, that create a problem. So that's why I'm not a pessimist to situation in Lebanon. I am pessimist for the political situation in Lebanon and not the economic situation. And maybe the two, maybe somebody confused between the both. But I think the main problem and the political problem, because Lebanon is not a poor country, it's a very rich country. We have a lot of solution to stimulate this country, and this is good opportunity to construct an economy and to construct our country and restart with the new trend or new schema together. So really, thank you for this for inviting me. And I am very optimistic for the situation in Lebanon, as I said, economic one. And I have to present my apologize and my excuse about my English language. My English language, it's not very, we have some mistake. Maybe the message cannot arrive very, very well for you, but I have to excuse about my English language. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Assem?
Daniel, it was a pleasure meeting you. I mean, yes, it was very clear that the message was, your message was from the heart, that you care, and it was very obvious, at least to me. Robert, thank you, and I want to thank everybody for giving me this opportunity to share with you my thoughts. As Daniel indicated, Lebanon is not a poor country. To the contrary, it's very rich, but it is ill-managed. It is very poorly managed. Unfortunately, the people in this country deserve better leaders, and hopefully they will learn to elect better ones. We are working with several entities in terms of, we screwed up by having Lebanese forced to leave the country. They saved money and they brought it back. Let's not do injustice twice to the same generation. Make sure that, being transparent, try to do something to protect at least some minimum level of funding and to have a plan. Unfortunately, till today, there are so many conflicts of interest. But at the end of the day, it's like pulling hair. At the end of the day, I think they will do the right thing. And as I said earlier, this is a country whose asset is size. We had a statement by the US ambassador. The dollar, the black market, dropped significantly. And that tells you about the fragile situation. It's all about vote of confidence. Once we have a positive news, people are gonna go back and they will rebuild. This is what Lebanese are made of. And hopefully they will do justice for those who sacrificed by leaving the country and starting their lives outside.
Thank you very much, Assem. Our association, Medical Association, Lebanon, Brazil. Thanks, Dr. Assem, Dr. Daniel. We thank you very much for your time in Saturday, and see you again. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.